The courtroom buzzed softly with murmurs, hushed whispers bouncing off marble walls, as spectators settled into the long wooden benches. It wasn't a typical trial. The stakes were unusually high, not because of a high-profile criminal or sensational news, but because the only eyewitness to a terrible crime was a child. A very young one. 3-year-old Lily entered the courtroom holding tightly to a warm, faded stuffed bunny named Blue. Her mother, pale and visibly shaken, guided her forward with a trembling hand. The child's steps were tiny, her body tense with anxiety. Her hair had been carefully brushed into pigtails, but her eyes gave everything away. They were wide, watchful, and filled with a fear no toddler should ever have to carry. Following quietly behind them was Max. He wasn't wearing a badge anymore. The German Shepherd had served nearly 8 years on the force, before being reassigned to a new role, one that didn't require chasing suspects or sniffing out danger. Max had become a comfort canine, trained specifically to support vulnerable witnesses in courtrooms, especially children. He walked with a calm, deliberate grace, sensing tension in the air like a whisper in the wind. His leash was loose, his eyes alert. All eyes turned as they entered. Reporters tried not to raise their phones too obviously. A few jurors stiffened slightly, unsure how to process the sight of such a small girl walking into a place filled with solemnity, law books, and unfamiliar faces. Judge Reynolds peered over his glasses at the child, and then to the canine at her side. "Is this the comfort dog I was told about?" he asked the prosecutor. "Yes, Your Honor. Max is trained and certified. He'll remain at her feet during questioning, silent, calm, and unobtrusive." The judge gave a short nod. "Then let him do his duty." Lily was gently led to the witness stand. The courtroom had provided a booster seat just for her, but it still seemed comically large for such a small girl. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She simply clutched Blue and sat stiffly, her little shoes not even touching the ground. Max settled at her feet. Across the room sat the accused, Alan Carter, a former daycare worker in his 40s. He wore a plain suit and an unreadable expression. To the untrained eye, he looked like any other quiet man facing serious charges. But Lily's shoulders visibly tensed when she caught a glimpse of him. She shifted slightly, moving closer to Max. Her mother watched from the front row, clutching tissues. She had fought to bring this case forward after discovering bruises on Lily's arms and hearing her daughter scream in her sleep for weeks. But no matter how hard professionals tried, Lily had shut down. Therapists, social workers, even dolls. And art sessions failed to unlock her voice. Every time she was asked what happened, she just curled into herself. Until Max, in a small private session arranged through the Child Advocacy Center, Max was introduced to Lily. He didn't bark or jump. He simply lay next to her, quiet and steady. After 20 minutes, Lily placed her hand on his head. 10 minutes later, she whispered her first word in weeks. Safe. And now, here they were. The prosecutor rose and walked gently toward the bench, her voice soft. "Hi, Lily," she began, kneeling so she wasn't towering over the child. "Do you remember me? I'm Megan. You met me before, remember?" Lily didn't speak. Her eyes darted toward Max. Megan smiled. "Max is such a good boy, isn't he?" Still silence. The courtroom waited, breath held. Then, slowly, Lily's tiny hand reached down. She touched Max's fur first hesitantly, then with more certainty. Her fingers gripped the soft hair between his ears, and then came the word. Barely audible, but clear. "Safe." The prosecutor froze. The judge leaned forward. Lily didn't look up at anyone, only at Max. "He made me feel safe," she whispered again, louder this time. Then she looked up first at Megan, then at her mother, and finally, at Max again. He came when I was scared. Megan blinked. Back emotion. Did you feel scared at the daycare? Lily nodded. A small nod, but firm. Was Max there? She shook her head. No, I wanted him. Gasps spread quietly through the gallery. Alan Carter's lawyer shifted uncomfortably. The man on trial hadn't moved, but his lips were pressed tightly together now. Can you tell us, Megan asked gently, what happened when you were scared? Lily's lip quivered. She didn't speak. Max shifted slightly, lifting his head, nudging her foot with his nose. Lily placed her hand on his head again. Mr. Allen hurt me, she said suddenly. Her voice was clear, steady. He yelled and locked the door. The entire courtroom froze. Even Judge Reynolds, known for his stoic demeanor, looked visibly moved. The prosecutor gave a pause, then asked gently, "How did that make you feel?" I cried, Lily said. I wanted Max, but he wasn't there. The jury didn't blink. The courtroom remained in stunned silence. Even the clacking of the stenographer's keys seemed softer, more reverent. He said I had to be quiet. Lily added, looking down now. He said nobody would believe me. The prosecutor was about to speak, but Lily raised her head again. But Max believes me, she said. Right, Max? The dog didn't move. But everyone felt the answer. A murmur rippled through the crowd. A woman in the second row began sobbing quietly. The mother buried her face in her hands. The judge cleared his throat. Order, he said, but his voice cracked slightly. Let's continue. And that was when everyone realized something powerful had happened. Not a dramatic testimony, not a confession, but a breakthrough. A little girl who hadn't spoken in weeks just said the one thing that could not be ignored. One word had shattered the wall of silence. Safe. And with that word, the entire case began to shift. The courtroom air felt heavier now, weighted by the raw truth that had just emerged from a 3-year-old's lips. Safe. Just one word, and yet it had changed everything. Judge Reynolds leaned back slowly in his chair, visibly affected, trying to maintain order in a moment already etched into everyone's memory. The prosecutor, Megan Hayes, stood still, carefully watching Lily. She didn't rush. She knew the fragile balance between trust and pressure could collapse if pushed too far. Lily had spoken. That was the miracle. Now came the careful, respectful guidance through her experience. Max remained beside the stand, eyes calm, ears slightly forward. His body, though resting, was alert. He sensed tension, emotion, even the weight of Lily's words. To everyone else, he was just a retired police dog. To Lily, he was a guardian. Megan kneeled again. Lily, she said gently, you said Max made you feel safe. Did you feel safe with Mr. Allen? Lily looked down, her fingers clinging to Max's fur. She shook her head. Can you tell us why? She hesitated. Then, in a voice barely louder than her breath, she said, he was mean. The room stayed still. No one even dared cough. What did Mr. Allen do that was mean? Megan asked softly. Lily took a moment. Her fingers played with the ear of her stuffed bunny, Blue. Then she whispered, he yelled at me. He locked the closet. I cried and he laughed. That was all it took. One of the jurors, a middle-aged woman with 2 grandkids, covered her mouth with her hand. The emotion was palpable. There was no acting, no rehearsal in Lily's words. Only the honest truth of a terrified child. Megan continued, was there anyone else in the closet with you? Lily nodded. Joey. A ripple moved through the room. Joey was another child mentioned in the case, too young, too scared, and completely silent until now. His parents had tried everything to get him to speak, but he hadn't uttered a word about the incident. And what did Mr. Allen say when you cried? Megan asked, keeping her voice level and soft. He said nobody would come, Lily replied. He said I was bad. Did you tell your mommy? Lily nodded. I told her later, but not right away. Why not? Lily paused. Because he said he'd take my bunny away. And he said no one would believe me. The room inhaled sharply. That fear, the fear of not being believed, was something every adult could relate to. But coming from a 3-year-old, it struck the jury like thunder. And Max? Megan asked. Did you know him before today? Lily shook her head. But he knows I'm not bad. A tear slid down Megan's cheek. She quickly wiped it before standing. No more questions, Your Honor. The judge nodded slowly. Cross-examination? The defense attorney, Martin Bell, stood awkwardly. He hadn't expected this. His entire strategy had relied on Lily not talking. Now he was up against the purest form of witness testimony. Truth from a child, unfiltered and genuine. He walked slowly toward the stand, adjusting his tie. Hi there, Lily, he said, attempting a gentle tone. I'm Mr. Bell. Lily didn't look at him. She looked at Max. I just want to ask you a few things, he continued. You're doing very well. She said nothing. Mr. Bell took a breath. Do you know the difference between a truth and a lie? Lily nodded. And you're telling the truth today? She nodded again. Max doesn't like lies, she added, unprompted. The courtroom stirred. Bell blinked, slightly thrown. Off. You said Mr. Allen locked you in a closet, he continued. But is it possible you are just playing hide and seek? Lily's face hardened. She shook her head. He was mad. Did he say it was a game? No. Did you see anyone else make you go into the closet? No. Could it have been an accident? Lily looked at Max, then straight at the lawyer. He smiled when I cried, she said. Games don't feel like that. Silence. Complete, suffocating silence. Bell swallowed hard. No? Further questions, Your Honor. As he sat down, he looked defeated. His client, Alan Carter, clenched his jaw, but said nothing. His eyes darted around the courtroom, perhaps hoping anyone was still on his side. But the faces around him were painted in disbelief and quiet rage. Judge Reynolds called for a short recess. The moment Lily stepped off the stand, her mother rushed forward. But Lily didn't cry. She went straight to Max, threw her arms around his neck, and whispered something into his ear. Nobody heard what it was. But Max sat there, motionless, as if receiving a royal secret. Reporters sprinted out of the courtroom, scrambling to write headlines. 3-year-old shocks court with emotional testimony. Dog sparks breakthrough in abuse trial. The public hadn't even heard the full story yet, but inside those walls, they all knew. Justice had taken a sharp turn. Outside, camera crews buzzed with excitement. Inside, the judge returned and ordered the trial to proceed. The next witnesses, a medical examiner and child psychologist, would confirm what Lily had revealed: bruising patterns, emotional trauma, and fear responses, all aligned with her account. But nothing would ever be as powerful as what the little girl had said while petting a police dog in open court. That one word, safe, echoed through the case like a bell ringing down a quiet canyon. It was the moment the tide turned. And now, nothing would ever be the same. After the recess, the courtroom felt different, charged, tense, but also strangely hopeful. What had begun as a fragile and uncertain case now carried weight, clarity, and most of all, truth. The shift had been triggered by the smallest voice. In the room, guided by the presence of a dog who never said a word. Lily had been escorted out of the courtroom during the recess to rest. Max had stayed at her side, refusing to move even as court staff gently tried to lead him away. The judge had given quiet permission. Let him be. He's done more in 10 minutes than some do in 10 years. As the session resumed, Dr. Karen Ellison, a child trauma psychologist, took the stand. She had been assigned to Lily's case early on. Her credentials were lengthy, her voice calm, professional. But even she had tears in her eyes as she testified. Lily exhibited classic symptoms of post-traumatic stress, she began. Sleep disturbances, withdrawal, mutism, and clinging to a comfort object in her case. The stuffed animal she calls Blue. The prosecutor, Megan Hayes, nodded. And had Lily ever disclosed specific details to you before her court appearance? Dr. Ellison shook her head. No, she couldn't speak of it. Every attempt led to trembling, crying, or complete silence. We feared her testimony might never come. What changed? The psychologist hesitated, her eyes drifting to the door Lily had exited through earlier. Max, she said. The presence of the dog introduced a sense of safety that no human had been able to provide. He's trained, yes, but there's something deeper at play. Children recognize trust in animals faster than they do in people. Max became her anchor. Megan leaned forward. So when she said safe, that word had weight. Dr. Ellison nodded. For a traumatized child to associate a feeling of safety to someone or something, that's monumental. It means healing has started. Across the room, Alan. Carter looked increasingly anxious. A mask of composure he had worn on the first day was cracking. His defense attorney whispered something to him, but he didn't respond. His eyes were locked forward, unblinking. The defense attempted to cross-examine Dr. Ellison, but gained little ground. She answered calmly, citing science, not speculation. Children don't make these stories up, not with this level of detail, fear response, and corroborating symptoms, she concluded, and especially not children this young. Next came the forensic nurse. Her testimony painted an even, darker picture. Light bruising consistent with restraint, slight abrasions, and a trauma response in Lily's body language that aligned with long-term emotional distress. When shown photographs of the daycare closet, Lily had reportedly frozen, gone pale, and whispered, "That's where the bad day started." By now, the jury was leaning forward in their seats. Each new detail matched Lily's simple but devastating words. Her initial testimony, once considered fragile and unreliable, had grown into a storm of undeniable truth. Then came Joey's mother. Her son, also 3, had been in the same daycare. Though he hadn't spoken of the incident, she now tearfully recounted behaviors that matched Lily's. Nightmares, sudden aggression, fear of closed doors. The courtroom listened in stunned silence as she admitted she hadn't believed it at first. "I didn't want it to be true," she said through tears. But when I heard Lily say, he smiled when she cried, I knew. I've seen that same fear in my son's eyes. The judge gave her a moment to collect herself. "You're very brave," he said gently. "And you're not alone." It wasn't often that a courtroom became a place of collective empathy. But this case was different. It wasn't about complex financial crimes or legal loopholes. It was about trust broken and innocence stolen, and the extraordinary way healing had begun. Megan returned to her seat beside the prosecutor's table. Max lay at her feet now, his head on his paws, eyes closed. It was as if he knew the hardest part of the battle had been won. But the trial wasn't over. Alan Carter still hadn't testified. His defense attorney debated it intensely over lunch. If Carter took the stand, he could try to explain away the accusations, claim misunderstandings, deny any wrongdoing. But if he didn't, the silence might speak louder than words. They chose silence. The defense rested without calling him to testify. It was a decision that would haunt them. As closing arguments approached, Megan crafted every word with care. She didn't lean on drama. She didn't need to. The child had already spoken the loudest truth. "This little girl," Megan said, motioning gently toward the now empty witness stand, was not supposed to be our strongest voice. She had every reason to stay silent. But she found courage in a companion we all overlooked. A retired dog silent. Loyal, unshaken helped her speak. She turned to the jury. And when she said she was safe beside Max, we saw what safety meant to a child who had once felt completely alone. That one word unlocked the truth. Megan paused, her voice trembling but firm. Mr. Carter hoped her silence would protect him. But it didn't. Her bravery, and that of every child who finds the courage to speak up, is what protects others now. Don't let her story go unheard. You have the power to finish what she started. There were no objections. No dramatic interruptions. Just a courtroom that had already made up its mind. When Megan sat down, she reached down and scratched behind Max's ears. The dog didn't move. But in his stillness, there was strength. He had done his job, not as a police dog, not as a tool of the justice system, but as a quiet, unwavering symbol of trust. Outside the courthouse, reporters scrambled to assemble live updates. Social media was already flooding with praise. A photo of Lily gently hugging Max as she left the courtroom earlier had gone viral. The world was watching. And inside the courtroom, as the jury prepared to deliberate, every person, judge, attorney, and juror felt something rare. This wasn't just about a trial. It was about a moment in time where truth broke through silence. Where a child's whisper was louder than any gavel, and where one word, safe, meant everything. The jurors sat in eerie stillness. One woman scribbled notes on a yellow legal pad, her hands slightly trembling. A man in the second row tapped the edge of his knee, not out of boredom, but out of tension. Each of them had heard stories before, dozens of them, but never like this. Never so raw, so heartbreakingly simple. Across the courtroom, Alan Carter sat rigid. The confidence he wore like armor on day one had crumbled under the weight of a child's single word. Safe. His jaw clenched tighter with each passing minute, eyes darting toward the door like he was hoping to disappear through it. But there was no exit, not from this. His defense attorney, Martin Bell, tried to maintain a stoic composure. But inside, he was spiraling. He'd handled tough cases before, but this was slipping out of his grip faster than he could anchor it. His client wouldn't testify. Their expert witness had backed out last minute, unwilling to contradict the testimony of a child psychologist and a trauma nurse. Every strategy they'd planned fell apart the moment Lily had turned to that dog and whispered the word that changed the room. The judge re-entered the courtroom. "Is the prosecution ready for closing remarks?" he asked, his voice heavy with the seriousness of what had unfolded. Megan Hayes stood. She smoothed her suit jacket and approached the jury slowly, making sure to look each one of them in the eyes. Her presence was steady, grounded in the belief that justice wasn't something you shouted for. It was something you fought for. "You've seen the evidence," she began calmly. "You've heard the experts. You've seen the bruises, heard the silence. But most of all, you've felt the truth." She paused. A little girl walked into this courtroom holding a stuffed bunny and a heart full of fear. We asked her to do something no child should have to do: revisit trauma. And what gave her strength? She turned slightly and gestured toward Max, who lay curled under the table, unmoving, yet somehow radiating presence. A retired police dog, just lying there, listening, offering quiet strength. She nodded slowly. When Lily said the word safe, she wasn't testifying as a legal witness. She was just being a child who finally felt protected. And in that moment, we all saw the truth. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't rehearsed. It was real. And it broke open this case. Megan's voice held steady emotion. "The defendant may sit quietly now, But his silence is not innocence. It's fear. Fear of a child's words. Fear of the one thing he never expected a voice. She stepped back. We ask you to believe Lily, to believe the evidence, and to believe that sometimes the most powerful testimony doesn't come from adults. It comes from a child who finds courage beside a dog. She nodded to the judge and returned to her seat. Max stirred slightly, lifting his head and looking in Lily's direction, though she was no longer in the room. It was as if he knew she needed his call, even from afar. Martin Bell took a breath and rose for the defense's closing. He approached the jury with weary eyes and hands that wrung nervously. My client maintains his innocence, he began, but his voice lacked weight. And while we understand the emotional impact of Lily's testimony, we must also remember the law asks for proof beyond reasonable doubt. Children are impressionable, memories can shift over time. He scanned the jury, but saw no flickers of agreement. Nothing. He tried again. It's possible that Lily misunderstood an event, that she confused discipline with something more sinister. And without physical evidence tying my client to any act of intentional harm, we ask you to consider whether this rises to the level of guilt. The room remained silent, not skeptical, not engaged, just unmoved. Bell wrapped up quickly, his words faltering at the end. He returned to his seat without looking at Alan. The judge gave final instructions to the jury. Then, with one strike of the gavel, he dismissed them to deliberate. As the 12 jurors filed out, the gallery exhaled. The emotional tension hadn't broken. It just paused. Everyone knew what had been said. Everyone remembered the sound of Lily's tiny voice and the certainty behind her word. Safe. It echoed even now in the mind of the court reporter as she gently closed her laptop. It lingered with the bailiff, who had quietly wiped a tear from his cheek earlier that morning. Outside the courtroom, Lily sat in a quiet room with her mother and 2 support workers. She was drawing. Max was next to her, his leash looped around the leg of a chair, but lying loosely. Lily was sketching with pink crayons, drawing a picture of a dog wearing a superhero cape beside a little girl holding a bunny. That's Me and Max, she said. We're superheroes. Her mother wiped her eyes, smiling through tears. The courtroom clerk peeked in. They've begun deliberation, she whispered. No one knew how long it would take. But inside, in the jury room, it didn't take long at all. Each juror had entered with a clear image in their mind. Each had felt the truth land, not like a hammer, but like a whisper. And whispers, when true, are heavier than steel. It wasn't dramatic. No one raised their voice. They simply nodded. 1 hour and 7 minutes later, they returned. The judge called the court back into session. Everyone held their breath as the forewoman rose. We, the jury, she began, voice steady, find the defendant Alan Carter guilty on all counts. A cry escaped from Lily's mother. Alan didn't move. His eyes stared forward, but his shoulders sagged for the first time. The judge thanked the jury. You've served with integrity, he said, and today you've helped deliver justice to someone who could not fight for herself. Megan looked toward Lily's waiting room, her heart swelling with quiet triumph. Max, still beside her, lifted his head again, calm, poised. And as the gavel struck once more, the courtroom knew. It wasn't the loudest voice that won this case. It was the smallest. As the word guilty echoed through the courtroom, the air seemed to stand still. It wasn't just a verdict. It was a collective breath being held and finally released. Some jurors looked downward, blinking away tears. Others kept there, gaze firmly on the bench, trying to stay composed. But the emotional weight of what they had just delivered was unmistakable. Lily wasn't there to hear the verdict. She was in the adjoining room, coloring next to Max, who had now curled up and rested his chin near her foot. Her drawing had changed slightly from before. The dog still wore a superhero cape, but this time, behind him stood a group of people, a jury, as her mother explained. Lily had drawn them smiling. She says they helped, her mother whispered to one of the counselors. She says, Max helped them be brave. Back inside the courtroom, Judge Reynolds addressed the jurors. You have rendered a verdict not just based on law, but on courage, he said. This case will be remembered, not because of its size, but because of its soul. You've given a child her voice back. Alan Carter stood like a man finally realizing the depth of the hole he dug. He didn't shout. He didn't plead. He simply bowed his head as the bailiff walked over and tightened the cuffs around his wrists. Megan Hayes stood as the judge, closed the session. She turned, caught a glimpse of Lily through the doorway window, and smiled. Max, who had re-entered the courtroom with the counselor during sentencing, seemed to sense it was time. His ears perked up when the gavel struck again, but he didn't move. He waited. The courtroom emptied slowly. No one rushed. Reporters gathered outside, but no one inside wanted to be the first to break the spell of the moment. One of the jurors, a middle-aged man with graying hair and kind eyes, approached Megan near the exit. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a crumpled sticky note. On it, in shaky handwriting, was one word. Safe. I wrote it down the moment she said it, he told her. That's when I knew. Megan's eyes glistened. Thank you, she whispered. Outside the courtroom, a crowd had gathered. Local news vans were parked beside police cruisers. Camera lights flashed as Lily's mother exited, holding her daughter close. Reporters began calling out questions, but Lily didn't speak. She just turned and looked for Max. He trotted out behind them, calm as ever, and sat beside her. The crowd hushed. That image, Lily standing beside Max, her tiny hand resting on his head, both of them facing the world, would soon circle the globe. It would appear in newspapers, online articles, even news segments. It was the moment everyone had been waiting for, though they hadn't known it. A quiet, powerful symbol of healing. That evening, local news anchors referred to the case as the Whisper, as shouted the truth. Across town, donations poured into the local child advocacy center. Parents called in tears, asking how they could help. Several even inquired about getting a comfort canine for their own traumatized children. Megan returned to her office well after sunset. The courthouse was nearly empty, but she didn't rush home. She sat in silence for a while, staring at the photograph someone had left on her desk. Lily and Max, sitting on the witness stand after the verdict, surrounded by quiet dignity. Someone had captioned it with the word, brave. A soft knock tapped against the doorframe. It was Judge Reynolds. I wanted to tell you something, he said, walking in with a folder under his arm. In 25 years on the bench, I've never seen anything like that. You handled it with care. Megan smiled, humbled. Lily did all the hard work. And the dog, the judge added with a chuckle. Let's not forget him. They both laughed lightly, the kind of laugh that comes after holding back a storm of emotions. Truthfully, the judge added, his voice quieting, we should have had dogs like Max in courtrooms a long time ago. Maybe we wouldn't have lost so many voices to silence. Megan nodded. That's already changing. The governor's office called today. They're asking for a proposal to expand the courthouse canine program statewide. Judge Reynolds smiled. That little girl changed a lot more than her own life today. The next day, Lily returned to the advocacy center, not for therapy, but to help decorate Max's new plaque. It had been created overnight, and now sat just inside the lobby. A framed photo of Max with a gold nameplate beneath it. It read, Max, the dog who listened. In honor of the quiet strength, that helped children find their voice. Lily didn't quite understand plaques or nameplates, but she did know how to draw hearts. So, with a counselor's permission, she added 5 pink hearts with a crayon around Max's picture and wrote in crooked handwriting, "Thank you, Max. I love you." Later that week, Max's story appeared on national news. He was even invited to appear on a morning talk show, though he mostly lay peacefully at the host's feet during the segment. A child psychologist joined the program, explaining the power of canine support dogs in trauma recovery. As she spoke, Max looked into the camera calmly, and viewers across the country fell in love. Letters began arriving by the hundreds, handwritten notes, school drawings, and thank you cards from children who said they finally felt brave enough to tell someone their truth. Max couldn't read any of them, of course, but Lily's mom read them aloud during visits, and Max would wag his tail every time Lily giggled at a funny drawing or smiled at a new letter. He never sought attention, never barked for praise. He just stayed by her side. Because for Max, the job wasn't about applause. It was about the one child who had once whispered safe into his ear, and in doing so, told the world the truth. In the days that followed the verdict, something remarkable began to happen, something no one could have predicted. What began as a quiet courtroom moment, a toddler's simple word to a police dog, was now echoing far beyond the courthouse walls. Lily's story and Max's calm, loyal presence had stirred something deep in the public. The media called it the safe word trial. But to parents, advocates, and survivors around the country, it meant something far more personal. In small towns and cities, children began whispering the word safe in counseling sessions, schools, and courtrooms. Therapists started using Max's photo as a conversation starter. Some printed it out and framed it. Others told the story at support group meetings. What Lily had said, just one word, had now become a universal signal for thousands of other children who had suffered in silence. And Max? He had no idea he was famous. He still preferred peanut butter treats, afternoon naps, and short walks around the courthouse lawn. But he did notice one change. More kids were smiling at him now. More little hands reached out to pet him. And every time they did, Max's tail gently thumped the ground. Megan Hayes, meanwhile, found her inbox overflowing. She'd received invitations to speak at child advocacy conferences in 3 different states. Universities reached out, wanting to study the psychological impact of courtroom comfort dogs. One email, however, stood out among the rest. It came from the mother of a boy in Montana. Her message read, "My son is 5. He's never spoken about what happened to him until yesterday. He saw your news story. And when I asked him how he felt, he whispered, 'Safe. Thank you. Thank that little girl. Thank Max.'" Megan sat at her desk, overcome. That single word, once whispered by Lily in a courtroom thick with tension, had now traveled over 1,000 miles and unlocked another child's silence. And who knew how many more would follow? Meanwhile, Lily was returning to something like normal life, though her normal would never be quite the same. The nightmares still came sometimes, but less often. Her drawings became brighter. She talked more, smiled more, and every Friday she came to visit Max. He would wait by the front window of the advocacy center, tail wagging, ears perked. As soon as Lily walked in, Max would trot over, lean against her legs, and nuzzle her hand. They had a new routine now. Lily brought a small book each week, sometimes a picture book, sometimes a coloring sheet she made herself. She would sit beside Max, read to him softly, or color with his paw resting nearby. "Max listens better than grown-ups," she once told the receptionist, who had to hold back tears. One Friday, she brought something different, a letter. It was a little uneven, written in her mom's handwriting, but Lily had dictated every word. "Dear Max, you made me not afraid. When I said safe, you heard me. And then they heard me too. Thank you. I love you so much. Love, Lily?" Her mom took a photo of Max reading the letter, his nose pressed gently against the paper. That image went viral too. But behind all the attention, Megan knew something deeper was happening. What Lily and Max had created together was becoming a movement, a gentle revolution in how the justice system handled the smallest, most vulnerable voices. And not everyone had welcomed it at first. There were skeptics, Judge Reynolds admitted in a follow-up interview. Some thought dogs in the courtroom would be a distraction. But after that day, after what we all witnessed, well, let's just say no one is arguing anymore. Lawmakers began drafting bills to mandate comfort animals in child testimony cases. One bill, dubbed Lily's Law, proposed funding for therapy dog programs across state courthouses. Advocacy groups rallied behind it. Families shared their own stories. It passed the state Senate with unanimous support. But perhaps the most meaningful moment came weeks later, in a small town 2 hours from where Lily's trial had taken place. Another courtroom. Another child, just 4 years old. This time, a golden retriever named Daisy sat beside the girl on the witness stand. She was trembling at first, too afraid to speak, until the dog shifted closer. The girl looked down, then whispered the word, "safe." Everyone in the courtroom froze. The judge blinked away tears. The prosecutor covered his mouth. A ripple of understanding passed through the room, as if they had all been waiting for that one word to arrive. When word of the moment reached Megan, she quietly printed the story and pinned it to her office wall. "Max is changing the world," she told the receptionist that day. "One child at a time." But she knew it wasn't just Max. It was Lily. It was that brave, small voice that had dared to speak when the world had gone quiet around her. That voice had cracked open the walls of fear and let the light in. And it continued to shine brighter each day. While the world outside praised Lily's courage and Max's role in transforming courtroom trauma, inside the Hayes household, reality remained more complicated. Trauma doesn't simply vanish with applause. There were still bad days, mornings when Lily refused to get dressed, nights when she cried if the lights were off for too long. No amount of TV news praise or viral photos could erase the moments burned into her memory. The word safe had opened a door, but behind it still lived shadows. Her mother, Emily Hayes, knew this all too well. "I'm proud of her," she told Megan one afternoon at the center. "But she's just a little girl. People keep calling her a hero. But I see the shaking hands, the sleepless nights. I just want my baby to feel normal again." Megan nodded quietly. She'd worked with dozens of families like the Hayeses. And each time a child found the courage to speak, it wasn't the end of the road. It was the beginning of another one, paved with therapy, patience, and hard-won healing. Still, something had shifted in Lily. She was stronger now. Not because of the attention, but because she knew Max was real. He wasn't a cartoon or a dream. He was a constant. A friend who never asked questions and never made her explain. That Friday, Lily did something different. Instead of walking straight to Max like usual, she paused at the Advocacy Center's entrance. Her small fingers held something behind her back. "What's that, sweetie?" asked Megan. Lily looked up. A medal for Max. From behind her back, she revealed a makeshift award, a paper circle glued to cardboard, colored with crayons. It said, "To Max, the best dog in the world," complete with sparkly stickers and a scribbled heart. Max, lying on his mat in the corner, perked up as Lily ran over and pressed the medal to his collar. He sniffed it once, then rested his head on her lap. "He saved me," Lily whispered. Megan and Emily shared a glance, eyes damp. That weekend, Lily's story reached Washington, D.C. A child welfare summit was being held, and one of the keynote speakers, Judge Reynolds, had brought Lily and Max's trial as a case study. His voice was firm as he described the courtroom scene, but it trembled slightly when recounting the single word that changed everything. "What happened in my courtroom that day," he said, "was not only justice served, it was a lesson in listening. The attendees, judges, lawmakers, child psychologists sat in complete silence. At the end, many stood to clap, but some, particularly officials from other states, requested immediate consultation on how to implement similar comfort dog programs. In that moment, Lily's voice was no longer just hers. It belonged to every child too afraid to speak, every victim who needed help but didn't have the words, and every courtroom that had ever failed to hear the softest voices in the room. Back home, Lily had no idea about any of this. She was playing with Max, stringing yarn around his collar like a necklace. She sang little songs to him, some made up, some from the cartoons she loved. Max blinked slowly, his breathing calm. He didn't mind the make-believe. To him, this was real enough. But not everyone was happy. A few critics, mostly older attorneys and skeptics in the justice system, argued that animals in court threatened neutrality. One op-ed even accused the dog influencing the jury's emotional judgment. But that argument didn't hold much weight after Megan shared transcripts of the testimony, meticulously factual, consistent, and verified by professionals. Besides, it wasn't Max who had delivered justice. It was Lily. He had simply sat beside her and waited for the truth to rise. Still, the pushback prompted concern. Emily worried the court might change its policies or limit how much Max could participate in future trials. But Megan was ready. She'd compiled data, letters from families, and even video footage from trials around the country where comfort animals had made a measurable difference. Her campaign wasn't just emotional, it was evidence-based. She even created a booklet titled, "What One Word Can Do: The Case for Canine Companions in Court." It featured Lily and Max on the cover. Demand for copies grew quickly, and Megan soon partnered with a nonprofit to distribute them nationally. In a matter of weeks, courthouses in 5 states announced pilot programs for therapy dogs in sensitive cases. In one interview, a state attorney general said, "We're not just bringing in dogs, we're bringing back dignity to our youngest witnesses." And through it all, Lily remained unaware that she had become the quiet face of a justice system revolution. All she knew was that every Friday, Max was waiting. One morning, a new little boy arrived at the advocacy center. His name was Jordan. He was 4. His aunt had brought him in after he refused to speak to the police. They feared he'd been abused. Jordan sat in silence for most of the day until Lily saw him from across the room. She walked over, Max at her side. She knelt down and looked Jordan in the eyes. "He helps," she said gently, placing Max's paw in Jordan's lap. Jordan didn't move for a moment. Then, slowly, his small fingers curled around Max's fur. His lips trembled. And then, for the first time all day, he whispered, "Safe." Megan stood at the doorway, watching. She said nothing, but her chest swelled with pride. It had come full circle. Lily had once leaned on Max. Now, she was helping others do the same. The sun dipped low over the courthouse lawn, casting long shadows that mingled with the soft laughter of children playing nearby. Inside, the final chapter of Lily and Max's story was quietly being written, one that would ripple through lives, hearts, and even laws for years to come. Months had passed since the trial, but the bond between Lily and Max had only grown stronger. Every visit to the Advocacy Center was a reminder that healing was a journey, sometimes slow, sometimes filled with setbacks, but always forward. That afternoon, Megan Hayes received a call that made her heart leap. It was the governor's office. They wanted to invite Lily, her mother, and Max to the state capitol for a special ceremony. A new law was being signed, Lily's law mandating support animals in all child testimony cases statewide. The bill had passed with overwhelming bipartisan support, inspired by the courage of one tiny voice and one silent, faithful dog. As Megan shared the news with Emily and Lily, the little girl's eyes sparkled. She didn't fully grasp the significance, but she knew it meant Max was important, and so was she. The day of the ceremony arrived. Lily wore her favorite pink dress, slightly wrinkled but clean, and clutched Blue, her stuffed bunny, tightly. In one hand, Max trotted beside her, regal as ever, a new medal pinned to his collar. The Capitol building buzzed with reporters, lawmakers, and families who had been touched by similar stories. When Governor Reynolds stepped to the podium, the room hushed. "Today," he began, "we celebrate not just a law, but a movement. A movement born from the bravery of a 3-year-old girl who whispered the word safe to a retired police dog, and in doing so, changed our justice system forever." He gestured toward Lily and Max, who sat quietly in the front row. For too long, children who have suffered in silence have struggled to find their voice in court. This law ensures that no child will ever have to face that fear alone. The governor signed the bill to roaring applause. Afterward, Megan knelt beside Lily. "See what you did, kiddo? You helped change the world." Lily giggled. "Max helped me." And she was right. Max, usually so calm, stood and wagged his tail proudly, accepting pats and kisses from children and officials alike. But the story didn't end with legislation. Across the country, stories poured in. Courtrooms adopted their own comfort dogs. Judges reported calmer children. Jurors reported deeper understanding. Families found hope. In one small town, a mother told Megan about her son, who had remained mute for years, until he met a dog named Daisy in court. One word from that boy: safe. In another city, a school started a program teaching children about trauma and healing through animal therapy, inspired by Max's story. Meanwhile, Lily grew more confident every day. She still had hard moments, but with Max by her side, those moments became easier. She was learning to trust, to smile without fear, to dream again. One afternoon, as she played in the park, she spotted a little boy sitting alone on a bench, tears rolling silently down his cheeks. Without hesitation, Lily approached him, holding out Blue and patting Max's head. "Max helps," she said softly. The boy looked up, eyes wide. Slowly, he reached out to pet Max. A whisper escaped his lips. Safe, in that moment. The cycle continued. A whisper, a dog, a child, a promise. That no one would be unheard. That even the smallest voice could roar with courage. And as the sun set on that quiet park, the world felt just a little safer. Because of a girl who said one word. Because of a dog who listened. Because sometimes the quietest moments change everything.